We're all here for the Important Bird Area Caretaker Volunteer Program update. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement, and then I will give you a brief overview of Nature Alberta's role and the resources we have for our IBA caretakers. And then Amanda from Birds Canada is going to go over the crosswalk to the key biodiversity areas with you. And then we'll open it up for questions for Amanda while we have her valuable expertise and time at our disposal. And then we can have a bit of a round table of updates from any important bird area caretakers. If you want to share updates or any concerns or questions you have, we can kind of do that at the end of the meeting. Amanda and I don't have any major time constraints, so if we spill over past an hour and you want to stay and ask more questions about your particular IBA, we are happy to do that and chat with you today. All right, so, and I'm going to record the first part of the meeting so that we can post this and share this with anyone who wasn't able to attend, but I will cut it off before we start asking questions. So you don't have to be shy and not ask a question if you're worried about the recording. And if I forget, someone remind me. I have a bad head cold today, so if I disappear for a moment, just give me a moment to collect myself and I'll be back shortly. So I would like to open with a quick land acknowledgement. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, Nature Alberta acknowledges that the land we know as Alberta resides within Treaties 6, 7, and 8, as well as portions of Treaties 4 and 10, and is the ancestral and traditional territory of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We have a responsibility to care for these lands and waters and to honor the history and culture of those who have been here for generations. So many of you know Nature Alberta is the regional coordinator for the Important Bird Area IBA Caretaker Program. There is a current need for bird surveys at important bird areas across the province to fill in data gaps to transition our current IBAs to the new Key Biodiversity Area system. We call that KBA for short. If we're using too many acronyms, just pipe up and let us know. The important bird areas and key biodiversity areas are the main two that we tend to shorten automatically in our language, Amanda and I, as we talk about those two. So there are resources available for current and prospective important bird area caretakers in Nature Alberta's network library. Those IBA caretakers who represent a Nature Alberta member club may have a link to our network library in your member club manual, so you have access to that in that PDF. If you do not have the member club manual and you want to access it through our website, you can do so. So if you just go to Nature Alberta's website and you hover over Get Involved, click on the Volunteer and Job Board. And that will take you to all of the volunteer opportunities and job opportunities throughout Alberta within our network. And there will always be this important bird area caretaker post here. I try to bring it back to the top. Often, sometimes it might be on the second page, but you can click on there. It's got a picture of me, my smiling face, out in nature. And there's just a small blurb here. And if you click here where it says click here to access several resources, that will take you to the network library where all of those resources are. So I'll just go over them quickly one by one. The assigned IBA caretakers is a list of all of the IBAs we have in Alberta. I alphabetize them for my own sanity, looking through the lists, and the highlighted ones are the ones that currently do not have anyone assigned to them. So that's just a quick list. We also have a IBA Canada caretaker manual in here that has lots of content in it about, if you're interested in knowing more about what an IBA caretaker is and what they do, there's a good section in there, and then all the resources that are available as well. I also have a list here of the data deficient important bird areas of Alberta with a link to the map that Amanda, I believe, is going to go over with you today and show you how it kind of works and how you can interact with it. So here's just a list of those areas that are a priority We also have the IBA Caretaker Canada protocol for using eBird here. So just how to submit your bird lists through eBird using that appropriate protocol. And then just a quick description of the IBA coordinator and caretaker responsibilities, what our roles are. And then we have the amazing Nature Alberta checklist of all important bird and biodiversity areas of Alberta in here as well, that has lots of great information about all the different IBAs. There's another folder here that contains information about the KBA invitation to review. So I recently received an email requesting that if anyone has information to review the Castleguard Cave, Richardson Sands, and Whitehorse Wildland KBAs, that needs to be done. You can submit your comments, any type of comments, even if you know someone who should be contacted, you can leave your comments on the online platform by November 5th to be considered. And in that same folder, there's a bit of a backgrounder, which is some of the information I think that Amanda will go over today as well, just about the Key Biodiversity Area process. So those are all resources available to you at any time, accessible through our website, all about KBAs. So if you haven't already done so and you are an important bird area caretaker, please send me an email with an estimate of how many hours you volunteered monitoring your IBA in 2022. So I can add that in our volunteer database, as well as a quick summary update, including any highlights, any concerns, and if possible, a number of birding checklists submitted on eBird. Many of you do send me updates and things like that as you go, but if you haven't done so, please do so. And I'll send out a kind of a summary email afterwards requesting those things as well. So now I'm going to hand it over to Amanda Beagle, Key Biodiversity Area Coordinator from Birds Canada. You're on mute.
Oh,
there we go. Welcome, Amanda.
Okay. Can you just see my presentation slide? Okay, awesome. So thank you guys for having me. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm excited to discuss any questions that you might have. And yeah, I'll just do the presentation first and then we'll open it up. But first I want to acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the traditional territories of Blackfoot Confederacy, Tsuut'ina, the Nakota Nations, Métis Nation Region 3, and all the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. And I'm kind of new here, so I'm still exploring and trying to learn, trying to teach my son things all about it. So it's been interesting trying to learn all about that in the last 8 months. So this is just a quick overview of what I'm going to get into, IBAs and KBAs. Introduction, I will show you the new KBA website or registry that we launched recently, the IBA to KBA transition, quick case study, and then we can get into discussion. So I'm sure a lot of you know mostly about the IBA program, but I'll just kind of quickly go over what the program has been in the past. So there are a suite of sites designated for a large group of birds or species at risk, and our main goals are to identify them, which happened around 25 years ago in Canada mostly, and monitor them for population trends and conserve them when possible and appropriate. So these sites are mainly coastal sites or interior wetland sites, with also a few inland forest sites for species at risk. So there are more than 13,000 IBAs globally in almost every country, and there's been around 40 years of work on the global IBA program. Canada's 582 sites are shown on the map, but basically all this is to say that IBAs are a really strong foundation of the KBA program in Canada and globally. And around 75% of the world's KBAs identified to date are actually IBAs that have been transitioned over to the KBA program. So I'll talk more about that later. And yeah, we've always kind of known, obviously, that IBAs are really important for more than just birds. And we have done some analysis that indicates, that there's a huge overlap with federally listed, vascular plants and amphibians and reptiles and other species as well. So it's no surprise that they're a good foundation. So what are KBAs? These are sites that contribute to the persistence of biodiversity. It's a global initiative of some of the world's largest environmental NGOs, and they're all listed at the bottom there, the 13 of them. In 2016, they developed this standard for KBAs globally. We use that global standard to also create a national standard with a few tweaks to make it more relevant for a Canadian context. So KBAs represent a natural evolution of the IBA concept, and the big goal is just to bring all this biodiversity under one system for the first time. Similar to the old IBA criteria, we're focusing right now for bird sites on A1, which is species at risk, and D1, which is aggregations of birds. But there are a lot of important criteria that the KBA program introduces. So there's new criteria like threatened ecosystems, geographically restricted species and ecosystems, ecological integrity and irreplaceability. So a few of those we've been working on with birds, and WCS has been working on with other species. And a few of them we haven't really even developed standards for globally or for Canada yet. So they're still kind of in development all the time. So yeah, this is a tool that kind of captures the range of biodiversity values, and it is a quantitative tool and it's trusted globally. So this means if a location meets a threshold regularly of a certain criteria, then it can become a KBA. And if not, it can't be called a KBA. So I went over that. So just a brief overview of our partners. The three partners doing the bulk of the identification work in Canada are WCS Canada, or Wildlife Conservation Society of Canada, NatureServe Canada, and Birds Canada. So our partners are working to identify other species sites in Canada and ecosystem sites. And Birds Canada is focusing on identifying which IBAs in Canada will qualify to become KBAs. Currently, there's a huge push to identify sites. So that's our main focus right now. And it's a really big effort. Recently, we kind of launched our first batch of sites with our new website, and I'll show you that in a bit. Sorry, I just notes here. Oh yeah, and I wanted to note that even though there's, the three organizations that are running the identification work in Canada, there's also thousands of experts and other organizations and other partners that are helping us get the work done. So they're helping us ID sites and go over data and review boundaries and everything like that. So it wouldn't be possible without them. So I will stop sharing this and start sharing the website. So I can just quickly run over the website with you. All right, can you see the KBA website? All right, so I'm not going to go too deep into it because there's a lot to explore. But along the top here, obviously, the navigation bar, there's a lot of information that you can read into yourself about what are KBAs, who's involved, a whole bunch of resources, media resources, and frequently asked questions, key documents, and then how to get involved. So you guys can go into that on your own, but I will just run over the 3 kind of ways to search sites and species on this website, and share the awesome tool that we've developed. So this is the site search map, and the green polygons show all of the existing KBAs. So these have all been through the nomination process and have been approved. So you can filter by site search name and by all of these filters on the side here. And then you can also get a little bit more information that pops up, and you can view the site, which I'll show you a little bit later. You can also download the PDF map of this site. Another really good resource is that you can filter, and then you can download all the sites that you've filtered, either in a CSV, so a spreadsheet format, or in a shapefile. So if you want to download information about certain sites, you can do that easily. For instance, if you wanted just Alberta, you could filter it down to that, and then download all the information from the sites that are in Alberta. Also, there's a layer here that is all of the sites in progress in Canada. So there's about 1,000 sites that we're still working on, along with WCS, in nominating. So you can also kind of click on that. It won't give you as much information, but it'll give you a little bit of information on what we're trying to nominate the site for. Okay, so moving on to the site search. So it's the same thing. You can search by site name and the same filters on this hand side. Oh, and I should have mentioned that there's some criteria guidelines here. So if you want to know more about the criteria, you can link up to that page as well. And then also download data here and see all of the filtered ones on a map. So it all kind of links up together. I'll just go to one of these sites, and it gives you a whole bunch of information: land cover, protected areas, threats, conservation areas or actions, customary jurisdiction of each site. It links to a whole bunch of external links. So a printable map. It links to eBird and iNaturalist, so you can view other species data there and also submit your own. And then this biodiversity plot is coming soon. We're working with NatureServe to get even more site-specific information. And then this is the table. So this outlines all of the species that have met thresholds, and obviously other sites will have more than just birds. So they'll have, plants and everything listed in these tables as well. And then we've got a site description, biodiversity description, and conservation going on at the site. So then the last thing I'll show you, I know this is very fast, but you can explore it on your own. It is public now. So the last thing is species search. So any species that is a trigger for any of the sites in Canada will be added here. So I guess that's a good place to note that as we add more sites with more species, these will get populated and the lists will become longer and longer. So if you wanted to search, say, bank swallow, you can click on that. It'll give you all the information that we use to assess this species at different sites. It'll give you an option to view the map at all the sites that have bank swallow as a trigger species. And then more external links about the species itself. So I think that's all I'll do now, but I'll just put that in the chat.
I do have a question for you, Amanda,
Sure.
Before we open it up. The map that you sent to Patty and I, the crosswalk results, that one's different than the KBA
Yeah,
map.
I'll get
Is
to
that
that.
correct? Okay, you're going to get
Yeah, that's also in my presentation here. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Because the one that I just showed you is all of the species map. So that's all of the other KBAs that are being added for other species as well. The one that I'll show you later is just for bird specific.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Oh, which one did I share now? Okay. Can you see my presentation again? Perfect. Awesome. Okay. So now I'm going to kind of talk about the IBA to KBA Crosswalk. Again, I'm sure a few of you have heard about this, so I'm sorry if it's repeat. But so the crosswalk was an analysis that we did to determine which IBAs in Canada will be candidate KBAs. And as we touched on, the IBA program have been around for more than 20 years. So there's all these established sites using scientific benchmarks and a lot of ongoing work. So it was a natural foundation for the identification of many KBAs in Canada, and a really obvious starting point for sites that already exist. So first, Canada was one of the first countries to do this work. So there wasn't really an established process that we could use to guide our work. We just relied on our team deciding on the process, and our data guru, Dean, who is pictured here, who just, forged ahead. So the first step was to compile bird data that had been collected in IBAs and submitted to Nature Counts, which is Birds Canada's central database. And it brings together data from a whole bunch of places: eBird, Christmas bird count, provincial atlases, and IBA data as well. And this resulted in 17 million records being found across Canadian IBAs. Then we updated population estimates for bird species using a few different sources: BirdLife International, Partners in Flight, and COSEWIC. And then we compared that data to the new and updated KBA criteria to see which of our IBAs would meet standards for KBAs, both globally and nationally. And then, like I said before, we kind of just went with the similar IBA criteria that we used 20 years ago. So that's species at risk and aggregations of species. So to date, our assessment found around 50,000 records across the 582 IBAs that are currently designated in Canada that meet KBA thresholds. So these are all represented on the map. Out of all of the presumptive global KBAs, sorry, I'll explain the colors. The red KBAs will be global if nominated. The national ones are blue, and then the gray ones are we're calling IBAs right now, which don't have any qualifying data at all under the KBA criteria. So there's 282 global, let me go forward, there we go. Global sites, 156 national, and of those, there are data deficient sites, which are highlighted in the blue outline. So what I mean by data deficient is one of two things. So first is the age of the data. So when we nominate a site, it's preferred that data used to determine the status should be no older than 8 to 12 years old. So we can use older data to nominate a site. However, it would require, justification of why. So if it was a remote site that doesn't get surveyed, we would need an expert saying that, yes, this site probably still does qualify. It's just really hard to survey. But the species still depends on this site. And then the second reason data are called deficient are data repeatability. So for species to successfully meet KBA thresholds, it has to be regularly or predictably observed at a site. So it should be three observations in that specific season for the past 8 to 12 years. So also I wanted to just show you that this map is quite interactive as well. So I'm just going to go through here. Yeah, if you click on a site, you can view the site, click the view site info, and it'll go to this page. So it'll give you all the information that we had on the IBA website, basically. But we've updated it using KBA criteria and new data that we've been collecting over the past 2 years as we're we're assessing. So from being on this site, you can review the site with this red button, review site, and it will take you to a Google form that will ask you a whole bunch of questions about your site. It probably could take 10 to 15 minutes, depending on, if the knowledge is right at your fingertips or if you have to kind of dig. But it asks a lot of questions about boundaries, if they're still accurate, if bird numbers are accurate, if we're missing any data, things like that. So also on the map, you can link to this threshold for bird species data. So you could look up any bird species in Canada and see the thresholds of that species. So, and how we got there. So the global populations and where we got the numbers from as well. So if you're curious about, does this meet a threshold or not, you can look on this this site as well. I will put that link in the chat as well later.
I put the link to the map in there already.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay, so what are we working on now? We're currently undertaking provincial reviews to fill in data gaps for the KBAs that have been identified, missing species, and compile suggestions for new KBA sites. So this review's involved reaching out to experts to give them our initial results, like on this map, up-to-date bird data, and a Google form where we ask questions. So that Google form that I showed. And then this is especially important for those data deficient sites that I showed you on the map. I know a lot of you have bird expertise across Alberta and also with specific sites, so it would be really great to get your input on this. And for you to review any sites that you have knowledge about and that it seems like we're missing data, or even if you wanted to update text, there's ways to do that. And I can also send around detailed information on how to do that. We're also working with the WCS team on addressing situations where newly proposed KBAs overlap with existing IBAs and determining, whether they should be merged or separated. It's different for each case. So we're developing a procedure right now to, as we go through different cases. And in any case, we won't make any changes to IBA boundaries without reaching out to the caretakers and local experts first for their feedback on the process. And we're also working with WCS to add non-bird species data to existing sites. And the first few experiments with that is going through in BC right now. So it's all kind of new still, but we're going through it. And then lastly, we're going through the process of preparing our next batches of sites with a mixture of IBAs or KBAs across Canada, including obviously some sites in Alberta. And we have a process of technically reviewing them first. So that would be caretakers and other locals, and then generally reviewing them. So that's more higher level stakeholders, I guess you would call them. And then we formally submit them. So that is what we're kind of in the process of right now. So here's just a few numbers of some updates that we've got from different data sources in Alberta. So we have got, we've received data for 16 Alberta IBAs, and 10 of them were data sufficient and 6 of them were data deficient. So that's great. So 6 extra IBAs that we can kind of nominate for the KBA designation. So here's the map of just Alberta from the map that Stephanie just put the link to. So in Alberta, there's 47 sites in total, and they've been reassessed against the KBA criteria, like all the other sites. And of these, 20 could be global sites, 9 could be national, and 18 currently don't have any qualifying KBA data. So between the global and national, there's 13 that are considered data deficient. And I think Stephanie had put up a list of those. So that's really helpful. And again, that means that there's either only 1 year of observations or the data are older than 12 years. So before we wrap up, I will just show you a quick case study of what it was like to integrate new information and data and how we went about doing that. So we'll just focus on the Peace Athabasca Delta located in northeastern Alberta. So the site was originally designated as an IBA for supporting significant concentrations of waterfowl, including Canada goose, mallard, godwall, American widgeon, pintail, green wingtail, wingtail, northern shoveler, and canvasback. So after we completed the initial crosswalk assessment of our IBAs against new KBA criteria, the Peace Athabasca Delta was identified as a global KBA for tundra swan. So it didn't have any data for all of the other species that I mentioned. And so this met KBA criteria for aggregations. And then since we had data from nature counts that was only 1 year of data, it was actually considered data deficient at the time. So to address this, we reached out to local IBA caretaker for the site in Alberta, a Parks Canada biologist for the Wood Buffalo National Park, and hosted an Alberta workshop with Birds Canada staff to go through some of the review process. So during our meetings, we asked whether or not the current boundaries made sense, if there was additional bird or non-bird data, or whether the text account was accurate, or if it needed editing. And so through the outreach to local experts, we confirmed that while we only had 1 year of data, that the current tundra swan trigger is significant for the species, but it is remote, so it makes it difficult to survey. It also confirms what is generally known within the birding community, that the delta is significant for breeding habitat for tundra swan population. We also received updated text for our site summary, which included more information about the species that use the site, cultural value of the site, threats, and conservation actions that are ongoing as well. Finally, this outreach process also led us to discovery of new data. So we received automated recording unit, or ARU, survey data from Parks Canada, and then also an annual waterfowl account from the US Fish and Wildlife Service. That was an aerial survey from 2007 to 2015. And this data was processed and analyzed just like we analyzed the rest of our data against KBA criteria. And we identified new species triggers for bufflehead and canvasback, so both meeting global and national KBA designations. So this really strengthens our nomination of the site. And as we find more data, more of it will be added to the website, and we'll just strengthen our case. So that's kind of just an example of how a site will look data deficient, but it's clear that it's still important for those species. We just kind of need to try to get the most up-to-date data that we can. And with that, that's it for my presentation. Thank you everyone so much for attending. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or Toby, who's our KBA technician. And if you're interested in reviewing any of the existing IBAs for gaps in our crosswalk assessment, please reach out. We're more than happy to share that map and support you going through the process and give you information of how you can review a site more specifically. So
thank you so much.
I will open up for questions. Yeah.
Perfect. I'm just going to end the recording quickly here.